Welcome, welcome. So good to see all of you here. I am excited to be with you this evening, and my name is Ula. I am an organizer on the Green New Deal team for MN350. And before I continue with the agenda and whatnot, I just wanted to share why I decided to be here tonight. We're going to ask y'all to answer that same question in a minute in small groups. So part of the reason that I am here tonight is because I am very inspired by what other cities are doing around the country. We are going to hear from folks from Portland who passed the Portland Clean Energy Fund in a few minutes, and there are other cities, Ithaca, New York, and Arbor, Michigan, that have been passing really bold and equitable climate justice policy and figuring out how to fund it, which is exciting. That's one of the things that we're going to talk about. So that's one of the reasons that I'm here. I am also here because I have experienced the heartbreak that comes with watching racial injustice and climate change. Ever since my son was 1 year old and I learned about climate, I felt like there was need for me to not stand by and just watch, that I needed to be involved. And I've been involved in racial justice work as well. And so I'm excited to be with other folks tonight that want to take action. So just to welcome you all here, whether you are part of one of the ward teams that has already met with your city council member, whether you are part of another organization or are a climate expert, or if you are coming to this work for the first time, welcome. You are in the right place. So I'm going to go over the agenda real quick, if we could get that slide up. And so we'll have just a little bit of time to get to know some other folks on the call. We'll go over the background of the coalition, Just Transition Fund Coalition, that has put this plan together, who we are, why it's important. And then we're going to dig into the proposal. We'll talk about specific details of the proposal, and then we'll talk about what's next. How do we make this happen? So that is what we are going to do tonight. But running through the event and our work is also a web of connection. So I just want to invite you to think about the people here that we are all gathered with, being connected by invisible threads. And when each one of us moves, other people feel that movement. And the plan that we weave and the power that we build to pass this plan is only as strong as the connections that we build with one another. So I invite you to build connections and to bring your whole self and connect with folks. And just wanted to take myself off spotlight if I am not already, and just take a look at the folks that are here and welcome one another. If you want to wave or put something in the chat, it's really good to see you. And just, welcome everybody, bringing your ideas, bringing your whole self to this event and to this work. And while we're a very big group tonight. So while we are in the big group, we're going to ask folks to share via chat. And then when we're in small groups, you can take yourself off mute and talk to other folks. And we will also be sharing a feedback form at the end. So if you have ideas, inspirations, feedback, anything that you want to share with us, feel free to take some notes, and then you'll be able to share all of that with us in the feedback. And here I've been talking and on mute this whole time. Not sure when I muted myself, but just to say that.
You didn't mute yourself. You're fine.
Okay.
Yeah, you're fine. I've been hearing you all the way.
So welcome everyone. And I am going to pass it now to Fernanda from Unidos, Minnesota, who is going to lead us in a land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Ula. Bonjour, ni Palos, Nanotoka Fernanda. Hello, everyone. My name is Fernanda, she, they, and I'm an organizer with Unidos, Minnesota. And for today's land acknowledgement, I want to ground us not only in the space that we're in, the land that we stand on, but also in where we all come from. Ni masewali nawan toi notesh matkawa iwa mexicoltepet ni mochantia nishanabe wan lakotatlali. I am an Indigenous woman, born and raised mestiza, which is to say stripped of my indigeneity, in my family's ancestral lands of Mexico City, which makes me a displaced guest on Lakota and Anishinaabe land. And I want to ask, sorry, I can't remember who's in charge of the slideshow. Could we put the quote on screen? Thank you so much, Zach. All right, I want to present you with a quote from Potawatomi biologist Robin Wall-Kimmerer, which reads, "Action on behalf of life transforms. Because the relationship between self and the world is reciprocal, it is not a question of first getting enlightened or saved and then acting. As we work to heal the earth heals us. It is through intentional reconnection to the land and my own indigeneity that I've learned the climate crisis began the second land and people became commodified. So today I want to invite you to think about what it looks like to heal from displacement and exploitation. What does that healing look like in your life and in Minneapolis? And how can we incorporate that healing of our land, climate, and communities into the work that we're doing and as we move forward? And now that Ula has introduced herself and I've introduced myself a little bit, I want to guide us all as we introduce ourselves in small groups. So I'm gonna ask that you share your name, pronouns, why you're here, and what you hope comes out of this. We're gonna have 5 minutes in breakout rooms.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, it looks like our number has stagnated. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for your work in those little breakout rooms. As you can see, there's almost 150 people. So for the sake of time, we're gonna go ahead and ask that if you feel inclined to share anything from your breakout rooms, that you put it in the chat so that we're able to stay on track with our agenda. And I'm gonna go ahead and pass it off to Marcus.
Thanks, Fernanda. My name is Marcus Mills. My name is Marcus Mills. I'm with Community Power and Black Visions. And what I'm bringing to most of this evening is some insights on environmental justice. And starting with how this coalition is starting, I'll put forward some of the elements of why this is important and where we're going from here. So I believe we have a slide for this one. Who, what, where? Yeah. Sorry. Gotta shrink it down before I get my information back. Okay, and so who is in the Just Transition Fund Coalition? So who are the folks that help to craft the concept that you're going to be seeing later on this evening? So the names are actually put in alphabetical order in one place, but I've got them in a different order. Apologies there. MN350 Action is one of the main conveners of this conversation. Unidos, Minnesota, Sierra Club North Star, Community Power, Cooperative Energy Futures, Black Visions, Environmental Justice Advocates of Minnesota, or EJAM, if people know, and MN Renewable Now, Minnesota Renewable Now. These are some of the groups that helped craft the document and the proposal that you'll be seeing later on this evening. It's taken about 8 months to get this far, to get here. There have been conversations culminating in this process for quite a long time, but we've been meeting for 8 months, pulling together and crafting the concepts that you're going to be hearing more about as the evening goes on. The source of some of this information is a proposal that was passed in Portland called their Clean Energy Fund. And we have someone from Portland's Clean Energy Fund Coalition to talk to you about that right now. I have the honor of introducing them. Con?
Yes, thank you so much, Marcus. Hi, everyone. My name is Khan Pham, and I use she or they pronouns. And I am just so honored to be here with all of you. It feels really powerful to be in the space of translocal organizing. When we were organizing in Portland, we always imagined this was going to be more than just our city. It was not for just our city. We wanted this. We wanted to have this vision of what it would look like to organize a movement across the country and across the world, really. But yeah, just really powerful to be here with all of you and to see such great turnout. So again, can we share the slides actually? I had some slides ready that would help me explain in a more concise way what we did. So really quick, just what the Portland Clean Energy Fund is. It's a 1% business license surcharge on corporations that make over $1 billion a year nationally, and at least $500,000 in Portland. And these, obviously with $1 billion threshold, this is Walmart, Comcast, Wells Fargo, just the biggest mega corporations in the world. And then we collect that fund into what we call the Portland Clean Energy Fund to fund green jobs and job training and energy retrofit. So much like the group that y'all have assembled here, we had a steering committee, and it included both communities of color as well as grassroots environmental organizations. And these are groups that had never worked together. So it took us a lot longer, I think, than it took y'all to get together, because we just didn't have a lot of trust, and we have a long history of environmental racism. But over time, we were able to build that trust. And about a year and a half later, we were able to kind of really start to formally move towards a campaign. I was at the time a part of Apano, and we did a ton of it. None of us, I'll be clear, had any experience in this, in ballot measure initiatives. So we had to learn everything and get some guidance from some consultants who are pro bono, kind of helping us out. It's like, this is how you gather signatures so you can qualify for the ballot. This is how you do, door knocking and get what are the win numbers that you need to win. And luckily in November of 2018, we were able to pass this ballot measure initiative by a nearly 2-to-1 basis. Going up against some of the biggest corporations in the world. And next slide. So this basically, so the way it works is that the city revenue division collects all these funds from these billion-dollar corporations, and they put it into this Portland Clean Energy Fund. And then our city of Portland, it's housed within the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and they offer an RFP process. And this 9-member grant committee that represents the diversity, the full racial, ethnic, and economic diversity of the city, as well as like just sectoral diversity, then goes through all the proposals and makes recommendations to our city council about which proposals to fund. Next, you can see here the pie chart roughly of like how it breaks down in terms of going to renewable energy and energy efficiency programs, job training, because we really want to build a pipeline of people who can get these green jobs, good paying jobs, and also for regenerative agriculture, green infrastructure, and any future innovation that we can't even anticipate right now. Next slide. So we just did our first round of funding last year. It was just initial funding because it takes a while to actually collect the taxes and get the fund up and running. But our second round of funding, the RFP process was end of last year. And now we're expecting to announce the second round in June of 2022. And this includes home energy retrofits for low-income affordable housing. It includes job training for formerly incarcerated folks to be able to get some of these jobs. And there's just so many exciting programs that we're going to be able to invest in. And we're really excited to start, once we get the second round of funding up, to really start lifting up some of the stories of the grantees and the difference that these projects are making, both in reducing energy costs, building climate resilience through planting more trees, and also creating economic opportunity for folks, whether it's being able to stay in your home through reduced utility bills, or have these really good paying jobs. Next slide. One thing I did want to share is that the outcomes of the Portland Clean Energy Fund went well beyond just this one ballot measure initiative. You'll see many of the same groups that were part of our steering committee then turn to the state level to see what could we do at the state level to continue. We saw that there was so much power that we were building as we were learning how to play in the electoral realm. And about a year later, this state legislative seat opened up in my district, and we decided to go for it and use some of the same coalition that helped me win to actually take this seat. And I was able to get elected in November of 2020. And now with, working with the same group that we worked with before, but now with an inside outside strategy, we went across the state and did an Oregon Green New Deal listening tour. And you can do the next slide. To the next slide. But we were able to pass 3 really incredible bills, part of our Oregon Clean Energy Opportunity Package, with some of the boldest clean energy standards, as well as an Energy Affordability Act to ensure that low-income Oregonians can have a discount rate for their utility bills. I guess I just wanted to share that I'm really thankful for PCEF, because without PCEF, I think we just wouldn't have been able to feel our own power and to see that we could play in the political arena and not compromise our values, but really put forth our vision for a just transition that really centers racial and economic justice as part of taking bold climate action. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Con, would you be up for answering some questions in the chat?
Yeah, happy to do it in the chat.
So we can continue moving on, and people can put your questions for Con in the chat.
Of course.
Great. Thank you. So Marcus, back to you.
All right. So, okay. So the next piece is the climate action plan process. So one thing to realize about why we're having this conversation at the moment is that the city's climate action plan is being built. The Minneapolis's last climate action plan was passed in 2013. And so it's 10-year anniversary, and what the city council sees as the time to start getting rethinking about its climate action plan has come around again in 2022. And so one of the major reasons why we're plugging into this is because if we can push this process and achieve something very similar to what Con achieved in Portland, Con and their group achieved in Portland, we can be able to actually push for many of the things we want and have the funding so that people can't tell us, oh, we can't do that. So the intention over the city is to get more input from community. We hope to be helping to push a lot of that along, while the city sustainability office will also be trying to do so. They have dedicated to trying to get those concepts going. And we think that the organizing that we can do can accomplish a great deal to push the council in the right direction on this, and probably a few other matters if this is considered positive. So what does it look like to have a coalition that is deeply responsible to impacted communities? We can roll to our next slide. To minimize it so I can see what I'm doing. you see here the green zones built on principles of where you have the most communities of color, where you have the most pollution, and where you have the lowest income. That's what singled out these two areas in our city as the perfect places to increase opportunity and access in regards to green energy, whole home retrofits, and an actual way to ensure that any pilot programs that are done are either originated here or the best economic possibilities for them are processed through here. And so when you think about that process and you think about what would be best in order to ensure that a fund like this moves forward, you want community-led grant selection, much like Portland put into theirs. You want to be able to promote energy democracy and environmental justice. You definitely want to diminish the cumulative impacts of environmental injustice that has happened already. And you want to create better economic standard of living and better standard of living circumstances based in clean energy and energy efficiency, especially for communities of color. You want to prioritize employing folks from frontline communities to the careers generated by the work the fund finances. And you want community to have the right to review what has occurred and be able to drive adaptation. And so with that, I think we're moving forward to next slide.
Yep, and
This is Timothy.
take over, Marcus.
Yep, absolutely. I was just gonna key up. Thanks, Timothy.
Cool, thanks. Hi all, I'm Timothy Denner Thomas. I work with Cooperative Energy Futures, which is a member-owned clean energy co-op, and we're a part of the coalition advancing this project. I just wanted to add in a little bit about the moment that we're in right now in Minneapolis, and sort of in the context of why the city is poised as a leader, but really needs a tool like this to make progress. You know, when the first climate action plan was advanced in 2013, I think it's fair to say that folks thinking about climate in the city really didn't have equity, didn't have community development, didn't have you know, all of these racial and economic justice goals in mind when thinking about a transition to climate solutions. Over the past several years, so many organizations and groups have been pushing the city and really seen a lot more commitment, you know, supporting the development of green zones, supporting the prioritization of the limited funds that the city is already investing in climate solutions into communities of color and low-income communities. And the city has also started to put out really ambitious goals. The city of Minneapolis already has a 100% renewable energy by 2030, like for all energy users citywide commitment. You know, major goals around making sure all housing in the city is affordable, healthy, efficient. You know, starting to talk about a carbon budget, which I think is one of the most, you know, solid and actionable ways to think about climate change on a city level. But while I think it's been a really good goal setting, the resources aren't there right now. You know, the city has been pushing the utilities. Many grassroots stakeholders have been pushing the utilities to put real resources into the transition, and that's been, you know, a lot of foot dragging. You know, there's constant challenge around, you know, actually channeling investment grant funding into these sorts of solutions. Minneapolis really has an opportunity, I think, as one of the potentially leading cities in the Midwest and even all around the country, to deliver on what these big goals look like around climate when they're focused on justice, if we have the tool that can actually channel the investments to make that real. And that's really why this project at this moment is so important, and why it needs to be coming from community and driven and guided by community, is to ensure that that actually happens and that it's done right. So with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Ula and talk a little bit about the details.
Excellent. Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Timothy. So what is this plan? What is it all about? I think that, we could probably, if all of us in this room put our heads together, we could probably come up with 1,000 good things that should happen in Minneapolis. But in order to get something passed, we do need to focus somewhat. And so, next slide, please. So the focus of this plan, as we've been talking about, is the overlap between climate justice and racial and economic justice. So we know that the investments that we need to make in order to have a safe climate also can benefit communities that have historically been left behind. And not only can they benefit, but it is important that those communities be at the table and helping to design the process of how these things get rolled out in order to access those benefits and make it all work. So we are putting out this plan as the beginning of a conversation. We want this to be a conversation with the city and with the people of Minneapolis. This is not like we've, come up with the perfect thing and here it is, the end. This is a process. It's the beginning of the conversation. Next slide, please. So here are the 4 basic pieces of the plan, and we will be going over these in more detail in a minute. And at the end of the evening, we'll be sharing a PDF that has more detail than we could fit on these slides. But basic ideas are to make every building in Minneapolis comfortable, affordable, and carbon-free by 2030, to build community wealth and eliminate economic disparities and the racial wealth gap, to ensure that every person has a safe, healthy, and climate-resilient neighborhood connected by accessible carbon-free transportation. And in order to make that all happen, create a robust, dedicated funding stream to make bold climate justice policy a reality. So the first section goes back to Timothy.
Yeah, thank you, Ula. Yeah, so a big piece of this plan needs to focus on buildings, and a big piece of this is number one, carbon comes from buildings. The vast majority, almost 2/3 of our carbon emissions in the city are from electricity and gas consumption, and natural gas consumption used to heat buildings and power our buildings. And additionally, this is a major cost center for people in Minneapolis. There's about $530 million that all of us here in Minneapolis are spending every year just to pay our utility bills. So especially for low-income communities and communities of color, this is a gigantic economic burden. And there's also a huge health and safety piece of this, as well as an economic stability piece of this. The combustion of fossil fuels in our homes and our communities is a major cause of air pollution. We need to address that. We need to make sure that households have economic stability, not facing disconnections, which can threaten evictions, causing needs for payday lending, aren't facing uncomfortable, drafty, moldy building conditions, which contribute to asthma and other respiratory diseases. We need to do comprehensive investment into our buildings. The first and foremost step there is energy efficiency and deep electrification. There's so much of that $530 million that we're spending every year on energy that is just waste, and is money that we don't need to be paying for fossil fuels. And additionally, as we transition our buildings towards full electric sourcing, we can move away from fossil fuels entirely and towards renewables. And right now, the programs that support this are more designed towards, you can participate in these whole home conversions if you have money, if you can take out a loan, as opposed to a universal program. Yeah, the equity piece of this is really important. We need to focus first and foremost on low-income households and ensuring that people's energy burdens are reduced so that nobody has to pay an unsustainable amount for their utility bills. And then also looking at how do we support renewable energy all across the city. This includes rooftop solar, so ensuring that without an upfront cost, without personal debt, we can be putting renewable energy on homes, including multifamily housing and for affordable buildings, affordable housing for renters all across the city, as well as where can we locate renewable energy that is not located on the building where it's being used, but is shared and benefiting the whole community through community ownership. We're looking at, how do we do that with solar and other types of renewable electricity? We're looking at how do we do that with district heating, so ground source heating and other things like that, where we can provide heating and cooling to many buildings across the city at the same time. And how do we modernize our grid? How do we build microgrids that are going to be more resilient and help our communities adapt to increasingly severe weather and protecting people from heat waves and other increasing climate threats that we face? So basically what we're talking about in this section is a comprehensive plan for supporting investment in our buildings, starting first and foremost in low-income communities and communities of color, to make sure they're efficient, to make sure they're renewable, to make sure that we're building this infrastructure for local clean energy generation. And we're doing it in a way that is ensuring that people's energy burdens are lowered and that nobody is suffering because of their relationship to our energy system. With that, I'll pass it on to Danielle and Fernanda to talk about the equity and green jobs section.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we're going to be talking about our next demand, which is building community wealth and eliminating economic disparities / the racial wealth gap. Because as we've mentioned before, unfortunately, BIPOC communities and low-income communities are the ones that really are out here bearing the brunt of the climate crisis and all of the disparities as it pertains to, pollution, asthma, respiratory disease in general due to climate change and, again, pollution. So what does this entail? We need to ensure intentional and equitable access to unionized careers in energy and construction for communities of color. We also know that it's important to nourish our local economy, but we can take it a step further and make sure that we're investing in BIPOC-owned cooperatives and sustainable entrepreneurship specifically. Next slide. It's also important to ensure that any developers that receive city funding are providing adequate pay and a dignified, safe workplace, especially for BIPOC and other displaced minorities. Next slide. And lastly, we have to make sure that we're directly investing in community-led initiatives as we work toward decarbonizing Minneapolis. Why is that? Well, it's because it's imperative that historically underserved communities are not left behind as a new green economy grows. Next slide. With all that said, I would like to hand it off to my peer, Daniel Del Toro, so he can tell you a little more about an example of what all of this can look like, what it looks like when all of these ideas are put together into a specific BIPOC-led initiative.
Hi, well, first of all, let's start with why we are creating Building Futures Cooperative. As many of you know, Minnesota is changing. The state is becoming more racially and culturally diverse, and we are experiencing more changes in our climate and weather. While some folks may see these things as a challenge, we see them as an opportunity. All of our members are first generation Spanish-speaking immigrants to Minnesota. By starting a unionized cooperative, we are creating a way for immigrant families to create good paid jobs, and most importantly, to co-own a business. It's a way to create income and build wealth for families who don't usually have the opportunity to do that. Our cooperative will start by providing services in the construction industry, and in the long run, we want to be able to bring together all our skill sets to provide a full range of services in a new home construction, remodeling, and solar installation. We understand that this is an ambitious plan, And to achieve it, we're going to need lots of help. That's why we have developed 4 strategies, uh, partnerships with Nexus Community Partners, the North Central State Regional Council of Carpenters, and attending the soil table with, of course, 100% campaign to provide training and temporary legal and organizational infrastructure as we settle in our space, hopefully in the South Minneapolis area. Thank you.
Yep. So in short, with Building Futures Cooperative, we are creating a pathway to economic power, decision-making power, and profit distribution on our terms.
Yes.
And we're going to hand it off to Patty to talk a little more about our next demand.
Hey everybody, my name is Patty O'Keefe. I am an organizer with the Sierra Club. I use she, her pronouns. And I am talking about transportation and that being a big part of our plan as well. Transportation is currently the largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions in Minnesota. And for that reason, plus reasons of quality of life, livability, environmental justice, we need to create a system that allows people to move around affordably, sustainably, and safely, and to build a system that ultimately reduces our dependence on single occupancy vehicles. And that looks like a lot of things. It looks like increasing equitable public access to electric vehicles and EV charging stations, and yep, making it easy to go about daily life without the need to drive, making it safer for people who are getting around by not driving. It looks like, so Minneapolis actually already has a pretty good transportation plan that's intended to invest in public transit and low to no carbon transportation options. So it's also about making sure that our transportation funding and planning aligns with the Transportation Action Plan so that the plan's priorities are implemented into actual projects. It looks like advocating to the state and the county and the Met Council to also align their Minneapolis projects with the Minneapolis Transportation Action Plan. And then it really looks like applying a racial justice and a harm reduction lens to transportation, given transit stops, transit fare checks are oftentimes an entry point into the carceral system and a place where racism is very prevalent in our community. Communities of color are also more likely to live near highways and to be exposed to pollutants that come from our transportation system. And those highways were, when they were constructed, intentionally cut through BIPOC communities. So we need a system that prioritizes reducing traffic pollution in these communities and prioritizes environmental justice for everyone. And so I don't know if I went along perfectly with the slides, but yeah, I'll just also include that we need our new, we need our city to be resilient and to have plans for adaptation, and that needs to be really centered and really prioritized for our community members who are the most vulnerable to climate impacts. Cool. And I think I am passing it on to Marcus.
Yes, you are. Hello. So the next question is, how do all of these elements impact environmental justice and the resilience to adaptation? And so don't worry about the slides, but we've got an understanding of those concepts here. So one of the major elements in ensuring that these points actually manage to achieve environmental justice elements is to hand over some of the control to the communities themselves, to increase the line by which we judge how environmental impacts accumulate in systems, in communities. And if we ensure that those systems actually do decrease the overall impacts over time, through many of these various elements, we can do that. One of the examples here in Minneapolis, as Patty just mentioned, highways. Well, right by the highways in North, you have the Herc incinerator. You start combining highways, an incinerator, and several polluting businesses like Northern Metals or the DAP plant, and you start getting serious cumulative impacts in an area. Making sure that those are decreased through some of the programs that'll be funded by this plan is one of the best ways to accomplish it. And then to ensure that the resilience and adaptation in response to it is led by community. That's the best way to move further beyond that point, diminish cumulative impacts entirely, and to move into the kind of sustainable future, even for those worst impacted that we actually would like to see. And so I'll pass it off to Ula for the next leg of our journey.
Thank you. Yeah, so there's so many wonderful things, beautiful things that we want to do. And in order to be able to do them, we need dedicated resources. So there are many things, as Timothy mentioned, on the Climate Action Plan currently, the 2013 plan that the city is behind on, and there just has not been the funding or the will to make those happen. So we are asking for a dedicated funding stream, and what that looks like, if I could see the next slide, please, depends some on what the city is willing or legally able to do. So there's a few different options. The Portland option that we heard about earlier, Con used a different name for it, but I've heard it referred to also as a gross receipts tax on corporations. So that's one option. Another option is to use the pollution control annual registration tax, which is called otherwise known as PCAR. And that is something that is currently used in Minneapolis for other pollutants, but it is not yet being used for greenhouse gas pollution. Another option is the franchise fee. So Minneapolis right now is funding some of their climate programs using franchise fee increase that was passed in 2018. And most of the franchise fee is being used for totally unrelated stuff, not energy related, but some of it is being used for the Green Cost Share program, incentivizing clean energy and efficiency programs. And so that could be increased. And then property tax is another thing. Might seem like it's unrelated, but we're talking about buildings and the pollution that buildings emit being the largest part of what we're tackling at the city. And so taxing those properties might make sense. So we will be going more into detail on some of these mechanisms at our training later in April, and I'll talk more about that at the end of the meeting. But for right now, let's just say there's some different options, and we're gonna bring them to the city and figure out what's gonna work the best. But regardless of what option we choose, we know that we want this to be an equitable fund and to make certain that low-income community members do not bear the brunt of paying for the transition to clean energy. So we want to make sure that there are not negative cost impacts on low-income and otherwise burdened communities. And that if there were to be any impacts, that those funds would be used to remove those impacts. And we also want to, as we've said, focus investment in communities of color, making sure that we are righting historic wrongs and also making it possible for low-income communities to have access to climate solutions. That is important. Next slide. Another important piece, similar to the Portland Clean Energy Fund, we want this to be democratic. We want community members from most impacted communities, different language groups, renters, all kinds of folks to be able to participate in deciding how these funds get allocated. And next slide. So, so how are we going to decide? We are interested in figuring out percentages of a fund and where they would go. And this pie chart here shows where greenhouse gas emissions stood in 2010, but it's fairly similar. So it's about 75% of greenhouse gas pollution in Minneapolis comes from buildings. So we want to focus our investment on where the emissions are coming from in a way that also maximizes the reductions in other pollutants and increases well-being, health, good stuff for the community, as well as looking at where the city actually has the opportunity to make changes. So buildings is something that the city has the ability to influence fairly easily. So if we look at the next slide, we are proposing that for the weatherization, local clean energy, building electrification sector, we would spend between 50 to 60% of the fund on that stuff, 15 to 25% on workforce development, 10 to 20% on healthy neighborhoods and carbon-free transportation, and 5 to 10% on innovative community solutions, things that we learn about. So let's see. I think, what's the next slide? I think we're going to breakouts now, and it's Marcus.
Absolutely. Oh, y'all didn't hear that. Absolutely. So here's what we're going to do next. We're going to be going into breakout rooms to assess your questions. So you're going to be put in similar breakout rooms to the ones previously, and we want you to ask yourselves amongst your group these 3 questions. What excites you about this plan? What are you curious about? And is there a question that we should bring to the full group? Decide on that question together. How we're gonna put you in your breakout rooms for approximately 10, maybe 15 minutes max. We'll try and keep a close eye on that time. When you come back from your breakout rooms, go ahead and put the question that you decided to bring back to the group in the chat, and we'll be pulling them together during a break, which will be the next thing after this. We'll be breaking for 5 minutes, and during that break, we'll line up your questions, and we'll run a debrief for basically the last 15-ish minutes. Well, for the next 15-ish minutes after we get back. So we'll have everybody set up into breakout groups now. And remember, go into your breakout groups with these 3 questions. What excites you? What are you curious about? And what question do you think should be brought back to the full group? And when you get back, drop your answer in the chat, and we'll head to break.
So I am going to call on some of my other panelists to jump in here and help answer some questions. So Marcus, do you want to take the first question?
That'll be fine. So the first question is, are waste management, recycling, and organics recycling and promoting renewing and reusing included? Also, what about burning waste from HERC and the impacts that has on North Minneapolis and its residents? So some answers to these are, the plans actually include making sure that a number of these elements are actually included, but also the fund itself can be used to ensure that there are programs put forward to improve our operation on each of these points. So organics recycling, standard recycling is already a thing that is happening in Minneapolis, but the use of this process can improve and make more frequent and more effective its use. Organics recycling is part of a zero waste program that Minneapolis has been developing for quite some time. And while it hasn't come into full effect, small pilot projects have been springing up already. And this would make those kinds of innovations more capable, more available, and we're more likely to be able to pull them out of obscurity into the popular consciousness. Now, the HERC. The HERC is a county concept, but a lot of effort, especially out of Minneapolis and the communities of color around here, have been put in over the past 6 or 7 years to try and shut it down. A number of those elements extend beyond the city level, county level to begin with, and even beyond that, because some of the reasons why it's open is because it currently receives renewable energy credits from the state. So changing those kinds of things is one of the elements that would have to happen in order for that to change all in all and get shut down entirely. It is a concept that is being looked at by a number of folks, several of whom are not just on this call, but leading some of this effort. So it's not the easiest and most accessible concept to deal with under these circumstances. It is being looked at, it is being handled. A lot of elements of mitigation are here. And on top of it, some of the best ways to help push forward those efforts can be accomplished by this fund, partly by funding some of the research elements that have helped shut down incinerators in other places. So I hope that helps.
Thanks, Marcus. One other question that we had was about where can we see the full plan, and we are going to be dropping a PDF of the plan in the chat, and we'll be at the end tonight, and we'll be sending it out via email. Some other questions were around how do we engage the broader community around this plan, and we'll be talking about that shortly. So that's part of our plan to win. There was a question about, will any of these funding sources require legislative approval? And it's possible that the Portland style funding mechanism would require legislative approval, and it's possible that it wouldn't. So the legality of that is still in question. Let's see, looking at some other questions here. Marcus, you want to take this one?
Yeah, I'll jump in first on, is there an opportunity to do this at a Hennepin wide scale? First of all, it's possible. Hennepin includes not just Minneapolis, but well, there are 2 districts of the county in Minneapolis and 5 of them in the suburbs surrounding Minneapolis. So getting county approval or getting the county to move on something requires achieving some things outside of Minneapolis. Is it possible? Yes. Do we have friends on the county commission? Yes, we do. Our Minneapolis districts the Minneapolis district seats are filled by 2 individuals who are very much with us on environmental justice. Conley and Fernando are very much with us. The point is getting the rest of the council on board. You need 4 out of the 7. And that's a bigger lift than most of us are easily capable to do, partly because we don't live in those districts. So it's very difficult to move those folks. So I'll do that really quickly. Do we have another question? I'll do another one in a minute. Or shall I just jump into the other?
Go right ahead.
Okay. Another question is who is or did it? Okay. Who is or are likely to present the biggest obstacles to implementing this plan? So structural issues are one of the bigger obstacles. As we heard, one of the easier funding methods, it would require approval from the state. And right now the state Senate is not favorable to environmental justice issues. I won't get into why. Hopefully I don't have to. But another element is we have some city council members, not many actually, but we do have a few city council members who are unlikely to jump. Most of them, I would say all but 4, are at least movable. At least movable. We have a pretty good stable of our own allies, but there's about 3 to 4 that I would never count on moving in that direction. Thankfully, we don't need them. So it's just about making sure that the folks that are movable, the folks that are with us, and the folks that we can talk to understand that this is important to their constituents. And so that's really where a lot of this lies. So those are the obstacles are making sure that this is in front of them and that they understand that it's one of the more important elements of the work that they have to do. So.
So timeline for this project is another question that we got. And we know that the city's climate action planning process starts in April, and they want to conclude it by the first quarter of 2013. So it's possible that some of the things that we're asking for would be dealt with through that process. But the funding mechanism, we think, is something that could happen sooner than that if we can get the city council and the mayor on board. And we have met with city council members, so we've been doing some organizing. There's been ward teams out there talking to folks and then met with their city council members. So we have an idea of which city council members are most supportive. And we think that we can pass something through the city council. But it will require people talking to folks in their wards and getting a lot of people to those city council member meetings, getting a lot of people to whatever other stuff we need to do. Rally downtown, budget hearings. There's going to be opportunities for people to show up, and that starts with the next city council member meeting that is going to happen at the end of April, and you can participate in that with your ward team. So we'll be dropping a link about that in the chat in a minute. I think we have time for a couple more questions, and then I want everybody to know that we are going to save the questions that you put in the chat, and we will we'll answer them in some fashion. We have a frequently asked questions document that we'll share with you, and be addressing these at future events. So any other questions, Mark?
I'll forward one more. What were some of the specific job sectors that the job training will focus on? So easily we can say that several of the clean energy installation sectors are where job training can begin immediately. Even with folks that haven't done this work before, it is an easily trainable job. And it is a job that can be literally transformative as a way to, what's the word I'm looking for, as a channel through which to push into careers, especially in union labor working. And that pathway is only encumbered by the fact that especially folks of color have an issue with being able to get around town when they're dealing with low levels of income and transportation capability. And the point is, with a lot of this work that's going to be done in the green zones, you can actually focus the job training on folks who are in the green zones. I mentioned that lowest income was one of the major elements, one of the three major elements that selected those areas. So you can create actual economically transformative work right there in the green zones, because that's where most of the work will have to be done. If you think about the fact that these are communities of color and communities of poverty, when you realize that a lot of the work to get them up to energy efficiency levels, they're the houses that are of the greatest degradation. They're the oldest housing. They usually have the least insulation, which means the most work will need to be done there. So if the most work needs to be done in the same place where people need the work the most, you can actually eliminate the transportation issue on the way to getting them economically stable enough to get their own transportation, thus taking the hurdle away for them to carry forward into better circumstances. And you can actually begin to create community wealth along those processes by creating that bridge to overcome the transportation issue. So not only is that where you can get good job training focus, but it's also where you can get the best bang for your buck in terms of actual transformative capacity for our communities. Thanks.
So looks like Patty is available to take a last question. Patty, do you have a question that you wanted to take before we move on? Oh, there you go.
Oh, nice. Okay, thank you. And should I just be referring to the questions in the chat?
If there's not a particular question that you were thinking of, I thought maybe you had one in mind. We should probably move on. There's just there's a lot of questions. We're not going to get through all of them right now, but we will be addressing them.
I can just answer this quick question about the green zones. The green zones are were these geographies and kind of classifications that were created by the city a number of years ago to kind of show where people in Minneapolis are experiencing the highest amount of kind of energy burden and environmental injustice. So where there's like high concentrations of people living in poverty plus high concentrations of pollution. And it's actually been very useful because to have these kind of areas that are designated as like priority areas for investment, it means that we kind of have these areas that we know like there needs to be reduction in pollution, there needs to be investment in green jobs, there needs to be investment in clean energy. And so the city has kind of used that as like a strategy for how to concentrate investments. And I think that we probably could continue to do that with the funding that we get from the plan.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So moving on to how do we make this happen? And this was one of the questions that people had that I started to answer. So what is our plan to win? How do we make this amazing thing happen, raise the funds? And Zach, if we could go to the slides. Yep, what's then the next one? So we think that the city council can pass this. So the city council can cast the votes that would make it happen, but city council members cannot do it without you. And this is actually something that our champion city council members have explicitly said to us, that that they cannot do it by themselves, that they need us to be out talking to people, getting more people involved, getting more people to show up. So that means talking to neighbors, talking to friends, talking to other people in our wards, talking to regular people about this. So that is what you all are invited to do. Our coalition partners are going to be reaching out to partner organizations. So we're just starting the process of reaching out to organizations. And if you have ideas of folks to reach out to, there is a spreadsheet. Hopefully somebody can put the link for that into the chat, but we'll also send it out to you. There it is. So if you have ideas for organizations for us to reach out to, put them in the spreadsheet and we will follow up. Coalition members are also going to ask for meetings with the mayor and department heads. So that's what we're going to be doing. And so next slide, please. So what does it look like for the rest of us that are not meeting with department heads? What are we doing? So this is our phase 2 of our organizing. We just completed phase 1, where we set up teams and met for the first time with our city council members. So the next steps will be to meet with your team. If you have not met with your team before, to meet with folks, talk through your questions, talk through your plan for doing outreach in your ward, and think about a goal that you would like to meet for bringing people to your next city council member meeting. So first step is meeting with your team. Second step, come to a training on April 12th to get you ready to meet with your city council member, to work through the necessary details. Maybe not every detail, but the most important details for meeting with your city council member, and then meeting with them in the second half of April. And then we will come back together to debrief and celebrate what we have accomplished. So if you want to make this happen, participating means attending those things and talking to neighbors, friends, and folks in your ward, and helping make a plan for how do we reach out to people. What is our next steps? So in order to get involved or to stay involved, for those who have been already, we're asking folks to fill out this form. And Kayla, if you could put that form in the chat. This is a way for us to know that you were here, you heard it, and you're down to work on it. You want to make it happen. So there's a form there in the chat for your information, ward number. And while you were filling that out, I wanted to pass it along to T. McClenty, who is our new executive director here at MN350, to just say a few words.
Thank you, Ula. Thank you. I was just saying I'm muted. I wanted to take time to thank everybody tonight for participating. I know that you all are excited. That's why you're here. I was excited to hear the feedback from my breakout group. I started at MN350 February 7th to be exact, so I'm almost two months in. Excited about the work Ula and the team is doing at MN350. I'm excited to partner with them on this work. And my goal and vision is to continue the work that they are already doing, because they're doing great work, and to bring in more BIPOC communities into this work. as Ula shared, we can't win just with us. You know, you guys are here, you're excited about this work, but how do we bring other people into this movement, and how do we help educate them on the urgency? And when we talk to them about why this is important, I always say, you know, think about your elevator speech and how do you get your friend to get more involved into this work? You know, when I'm talking to my own family, why it's important to get involved in climate, and what does clean energy look like? What does recyclable energy look like? How much does it cost? Being able to have those conversations in our communities is very important. And also educating our community, because a lot of our communities, especially low income and BIPOC communities, have not always had the same information, I would say, transferred into that community. And so sometimes when they think about clean energy, they think about cost. And so how do we now bring them in, and how do we educate them? So when you're out there, as Ula said, and you're talking to your neighbors, be excited about it, but also be patient and help teach and educate, help bring more people in. And, you know, people are going to ask you questions. So just be the educator, because sometimes people don't know what they don't know. So I would just ask you to be patient and to contact your city council member. But most importantly, please go to the training that Ula talked about on April 12th. And I'm excited to partner with all of you in this work. And I thank you for your energy and excitement. And we got work to do. So let's just get this work done. Thank you.
Thank you, T. Yeah, and exciting to see so many people signing up and just to be here with you all this evening. So the way to stay connected, to make sure that we know that you want to stay connected, is just to fill out that form in the chat. We can also send it out over email, but yeah, I'm excited to work excited to work with everybody. It feels like this is something really big, something that a lot of people are excited about. When we started door knocking this fall, we were going to all different corners of the city, and people were really interested in this idea in all parts of the city. So we know that there's some issues that have been divisive, and this is one that that a lot of people resonate with. So that is exciting. So yes, we are gonna now finally put the PDF and feedback form also in the chat for folks to look at more details. If anybody can't access the form, if you just want to chat in and say, I want to be involved, that works too, and put your just put your full name. If you signed up for the event, we have your contact information. So yes, we want to hear your ideas, inspiration, and Kayla, I don't know if you're able to put the PDF. So there's the PDF. There is one change. So the one that we'll be sending out over email is going to have the change in it. This one. So, but you're welcome to look at this one tonight, and we'll be sending out the other one tomorrow, and the feedback form. And yeah, I mean, as the pandemic starts to settle, we are, more than ever need to work on the things that are most important in our city. And that means, working for a sustainable Minneapolis, working for a caring economy. We know that what happens if we don't care for each other, and if we don't care for the land and for our climate. So we want to make sure that we are doing those things, caring for one another. And so in closing, thinking about caring for one another, I wanted to just ask folks to one last time chat in. What is something that you would need to feel welcomed and supported in this work? And what is something that you could do to welcome and support others? Beautiful. Be curious and open-hearted. Have time to talk with others and know that I'm not alone. Yeah, nice stuff. Nice ideas. Helping with door knocking, getting help with things. So asking for the help that you need from folks is important. Practicing our 5-minute elevator speech. Longer time in breakout rooms. Yeah. So in the ward team meetings, you'll have more time in a smaller group to be able to talk to one another and generate some ideas. Meeting in person. So that is something that you guys can choose to do as your ward team or those folks that feel comfortable, especially as the weather starts to get warmer. Having folks over to the backyard, I think, is a great idea. Meeting other folks from the ward. Yep. Sounds like some folks are having trouble accessing the form. And so if you are having trouble, why don't you just chat in? Just say, I want to be involved in the chat. All right. So I am going to unmute folks. Let's see. Can I unmute you all? And let us say goodnight to one another. You're welcome to stay on and continue chatting in, but
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Folks.
Thank you.
Thank
Hey,
you
guys.
for everything you do.
Thank you.
Onward.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for coming,
Thanks so much.
everybody.
Very informative, very
Bye.
exciting,
Right.
inspiring.
Thank you for being here.
Appreciate it.
time for a theme song. Dan, do you want to sing us a song? Or maybe there's somebody that can write songs.
I can't seem to turn this off.